Can raising rabbits be profitable? Well, it can be. Let's talk about how. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now if you're new to our channel, we teach you how to raise your own meat, grow your own food, do all that in your backyard. Then we bring you into the kitchen, we give you some awesome recipes, we demonstrate them, we show you how to make some great food, okay? Now today's video is going to be a video series to show you how to make your own business. So we want to make money with these rabbits, and you know, a lot of people go back and forth on whether it can be profitable or not, or how much can it be. We're going to go through that now. Okay, so let me start with a really important clarification, okay? If you want to start a business, you're tired of your career, and you want to start something new, and you want to make some money, and like really, get on the Forbes list for fastest growing companies, this is not the video series for you. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if, we're already raising rabbits, we're doing it in our backyard, we're doing it for our own consumption, it's a hobby, but we're spilling some money into it, and that no one likes doing that. And is there a way we can subsidize that cost to where our hobby in the backyard for our own consumption can be cost neutral, or maybe we can even make enough to where it's actually an income? Okay, that's what we're talking about today. Okay, so let's start off with this. I've seen videos on YouTube, and a lot of top 10 or 6 or however many reasons and different ways you can make money, and it lists anything from selling their poop to their fur to just any number of things. Okay, is it possible to make money in every one of those pieces of inventory? It's possible. Is it probable? No. It depends. That's the answer to that. The correct answer is it depends, because your product is going to be completely dependent on supply and demand in your area, what kind of rabbits you have, just a number of things. We're going to go through all that. But just seeing a list of, hey, here's 10 ways to make money, I think that's disingenuous. That's not entirely true unless you dig into the details, okay? And at a minimum, I would say, let's say you sold a bag of poop once. Does it mean you can make money selling poop? Yeah, it does mean that. Does it mean you will make money? No, it doesn't, because that might have been the only bag of poop you sold in like 5 years, right? That's not really a business model. So we're going to go through the way to establish a company and make sincere money doing what you're already doing. And that's a deliberate path that you're going to select, okay? We're going to go through that. And what I would ask you before we get into this video, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Even if you have subscribed, pass this on to some friends that are like-minded who might be interested, and see if they can subscribe for you. All right, so I want to keep your attention, so we're going to keep these videos relatively short, okay? And the way we're going to do that, we're going to break it into a series. So looking back on how I established my company, how I got it going, and I got it to be profitable, I really went back retrospectively, took some notes, draw it into steps, and there's about 6 steps that it took to get where we are, okay? So we're going to go through that. This first video is going to be step 1, and that is tracking everything, okay? If you've already started raising rabbits, you're in the backyard, you've got maybe you started with a trio, maybe you've expanded from there, or maybe you started big, right off the bat. Whatever it is, you've been raising rabbits, you kind of know the ins and outs of the breeding schedule, the processing, all of the steps of actually managing the care of the rabbits, okay? That's not what we're getting into today. We have videos about that on our channel, but today we're talking about, making profit out of that. And that means all of those things that you're doing, you need to start with step 1, tracking everything. Okay, so track everything, right? What is everything? Well, let's go through it. The first and most obvious thing you would track are your expenses, right? We're going to keep it up there so we don't forget. Expenses. Now that's going to be your initial costs of cages, the breeding stock. So you bought a trio from a breeder, those 2 does, that buck, whatever money you spent on buying rabbits to get started, you want to write that down. Your any kind of materials, like let's say you're building your own nest boxes, all the plywood, put that down. Any of your feed costs, those are more of an operational cost, because that's going to not just be a one-time purchase, that's going to be a regularity type of purchase that you're going to feel, for me, weekly, okay? And so you need to know all of your expenses. And if you don't keep track of it, you're going to be very, very surprised when you start keeping track that, you really are kind of thinking like, oh yeah, I spent about $100 here, and then I have my feed costs. But as you start keeping track of everything, I mean everything, um, you know, look at your electric bill. Did it spike once you started raising rabbits? If you have fans running, or if you have an AC unit like I do, you won't believe how much it spikes. Anything that you can think of that was affected by you doing this hobby, raising rabbits, that needs to be marked down. And you can always strike it out and say, nah, that doesn't really count. Okay, but have it written down and go through it with the process of elimination at the end of the year. Okay, so you've got your expenses, you're taking care of that. Breeding, that's what you need to keep track of next. Breeding schedule. Okay, so that means what time of year are you breeding? Do you have a hard stop at the late spring, early summer? Do you try to breed all the way through summer? Is it just seasonal for you, or are you trying to do it year round? And even if it is year round, what if you have sterility issues? Okay, if the males they start going sterile because of all the heat, when did that start to happen? And if you're keeping track of your breeding schedule of when you bred, you can expect to have when they're due, and you should be doing that anyway, really, to know when to put the nest boxes in, when to take the nest boxes out, when to wean, all that kind of thing. So if you're keeping track of that through a spreadsheet of some kind, or some people do it the old-fashioned way and write it down in a spiral, but do that. As long as you're doing that, do it with the mindset that it's part of this endeavor. Okay, you need to know when your rabbits are breeding, what time of year, how dependable that breeding schedule is, and kind of have more of a grip on when to expect your rabbits. Okay, so for the breeding, keeping track of the breeding, a lot of people, when you get started, you're probably already doing that just so you can know, like I said, when are babies going to be due, when do I need to put the nest box in, that kind of stuff. So you're already kind of doing that, or you should be anyway. And the expenses might be new for you, but that's not a leap, right? We all kind of know we want to build a business. We got to know, what kind of money we're spending. So that's fairly obvious. The next thing, though, and it should be part of your breeding schedule that you're keeping track of, is litter. Okay. So when you're keeping track of the litters, you want to keep track of the size of litters and the makeups. That means how many babies, how many kits, okay, and boys or girls, okay. Obviously, it should be a 50-50 split over the course of time, but really you need to be keeping track of it anyway, because, you may not be, raising for consumption. You might be, just breeding and selling them as pets, as livestock for showing, whatever it is. But the bottom line is you're going to have to start to know if they're boys or girls. Because if you are selling them, let's say on Craigslist or something like that as a making your own trios, you don't want to sell $3 and call it a trio. That's you're getting somebody started on the wrong foot there. So you need to be able to sort of determine how to sex your bunnies and keep track of them. Okay. Also, you want to keep track of how many were stillborn. I know that sounds kind of morbid, but ultimately, some of this is genetic. Some of it's weather and other ways related. But some of it is genetic, where a mom just might be not very good at taking care of them. Or it might just be that she was stressed out, or whatever it is. But the bottom line is you're going to start to see the same bunnies have big litters and have healthy litters, and other bunnies have more than one litter of half of them are stillborn or really undersized or underdeveloped. So you want to keep track of all that, and the best way to do it without getting too carried away on a lot of detail is saying, okay, look, this is how many were in the litter. This is how many were born dead. This is how many were born alive. And you can do a separate column where this is how many survived beyond the grow out period. Or at a minimum, mark in the notes sort of when each one died. Like, hey, it was 3 or 4 days later, so maybe it's not getting fed. I mean, if she has a litter of 12, she only has 8 nipples, right? So sometimes they're fighting for it, and the same ones win. And once you lose a few times, you become kind of a runt. You're not as strong because they grow really quickly. And then all of a sudden, they just kind of get pushed out. They don't ever get to feed, and they may not survive. Okay, so the next thing you want to really pay attention to is the growth rate. Now, as you start to get into the business and some time has gone by, you'll kind of get a feel for it. And then again, I don't forget which side, but I have a video on sort of determining when to harvest your rabbits. It's really not on time, it's on size, okay? The only way to really know that is to be weighing them actively, okay? So I know it's kind of a pain, especially when they're little and they're jumping around. They don't want to get caught. They don't want to stay still on the scale. But you really have to kind of start with weighing all of them every week. I'd say weekly is enough to kind of get a feel for how quickly are they growing. Okay, I'll try to get a spreadsheet that I kept track of, and I did a chart. I'll figure out, see if I have a way to post it here. But ultimately, there's a growth rate where you can kind of count on a somewhat linear relationship between time and growth rate. And that's going to give you about half a pound per week of live weight, okay? Again, it depends on the time of year. It depends on, some DNA. Some litters grow faster than others. There's a lot of different things. So there's averages you can kind of project, but ultimately the only way to really know is to be weighing these things and to be keeping track of it. Okay, so I put the sticker up there for growth rate. That is not the same thing as weight, okay? That's another thing we're going to keep track of. Okay, so when I say weight, I mean when it's time to harvest. If you are doing it for consumption, if you are doing it as a product for consumption, you're going to need to know, when am I going to harvest these things? And that's going to depend on what size do you want to harvest them at. The live weight of what they need to be to give you the product weight that you want to be selling them at for retail, okay? And ultimately, there's a correlation, and again, whatever side it is, I'll give you that conversion on how to do that. That's that same video. But basically, it's roughly 60%, 58 to 60% of your live weight. That's what your dress weight's going to be once you've packaged everything up. Okay, you got to be able to keep track of that. One, will kind of show you how thorough or not thorough you are in the processing piece. I trim a lot of the fat out. I clean it up. I make it look really attractive when I process everything. And so I probably have less percentage because I trim it and I get rid of a lot of things to make it look nicer. You could probably get a little bit more weight on there if you leave that fat and everything like that. So you got to figure out you and how you're doing and what that looks like. The only way to do that is to track it. Okay, the next thing is harvest schedule. Okay, so that may not mean anything to you because maybe if you're raising to breed, if you're breeding, to give trios and things like that to get other people started, you're not really harvesting anything, so you don't need to worry about it. So this isn't true for everybody. But if you are raising for consumption and to make a product for consumption, do you need to have an idea of your harvest schedule? How often are you harvesting rabbits? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it every other month? What is it? Because ultimately it's going to come down to this. If you harvest, let's say, 30 rabbits, okay, that'd be great if you showed up to some sort of the weekend deals where you set up your tents and you're here and okay, come buy all you can, and you got it, in the freezer, and they're all frozen, and you're keeping them frozen, and you're doing that. Okay, that's great. And then what happens after that? What if you sell out? Then the next month, like, what are you gonna do? Just not show up then? So your farmer's market was good for 1 week, and then you're not dependable. So you'll never really have a lasting, brand or anything like that people are gonna remember. Like, oh yeah, it's the rabbit guy at the farmer's market. They're going to forget about you because you're going to be there, you're going to be a one and done, okay? You want to be able to get clients, whether it be at the farmer's market or restaurants or however you're doing it, you want them to be coming to you over and over and over again. And that consistency is going to come from you always having product available. And in the same condition, in the same size, you need consistency. So the only way to develop that is to know, where do you stand right now, okay? What is your output? And if that is, hey, I can only come up with, half a dozen rabbits every 3 weeks, that's fine. And you communicate that to whatever your potential client would be, and they can work with that, and that's their baseline. And if they want something more than that, you build up from there. But you need to be able to communicate something that's truthful. And you won't know what that is unless you're tracking it and you have an understanding of, what is your output. Okay, this may seem obvious or maybe not. But inventory, okay? So, let's say, if they've reached a fryer has reached its harvest weight, and you say, hey, look, I don't want to just keep feeding them, they're going to get too big, or I'm just dumping cost into them. I'm ready to harvest them, and you harvest them, you put them in the freezer. Nothing wrong with that. Maybe you'll consume them yourself. Maybe you have frozen product on sort of back stock that you can sell. But bottom line is you got to kind of know how much do you have, and when was it packaged. So let's say you have if it's not a farmer's market, let's say you're starting with a friend or neighbors who say, hey, look, I'd like to try a rabbit. I'll buy a rabbit from you. And you say, okay, well, I have some in the freezer. That's what I'll do. And you go to grab one. Well, you got to know how much do you have in the freezer, and if you just grab whatever's on top, maybe that's not the oldest one. And so the problem with that is, if you keep doing that, you're not paying attention. Before you know it, you've had some rabbits in the freezer that have been in there for a long time. That at some point you're going to reach a threshold where it's like, I don't know that I want to sell it anymore because it's too old. And that's only because you grabbed the other ones first instead of grabbing that one because you didn't know what's the oldest thing I have in the freezer. So you're going to be putting it on your packaging anyway, one, because it's good practice, and two, because it's required by law if you are selling for consumption. You're going to have to put your package date on there, okay? Once you do that, just keep track of that on a spreadsheet so you know at any given time, here's all the product I have in the freezer, here's when it was all packaged, so I know, okay, if I'm going to consume a rabbit myself, I'm going to do a recipe for do a cooking video or something like that. I'm not going to grab the freshest rabbit I have. I'm going to probably go to the freezer and get the oldest one in there just to make sure I'm knocking out the back stock and getting it as recently as I can so that when I sell, it's only been frozen for a week, let's say. And again, you got to remember too, some clients don't want them frozen. They want them fresh. They want them alive yesterday. They want them processed, packaged, and delivered right there. So that won't even be an issue for those type of clients. But if you're trying to build back stock, you're trying to have freezer stock ready for a farmer's market or for just some onesie-twosie sales and things like that, you're going to need to know how much you have and when it was packaged. Okay, guys, that's basically it for tracking, okay? You want to make sure you're tracking all of your expenses, your initial, your continuing costs for reinvesting and building up your rabbitry, all of your operational costs like feed, maybe even keep track of mileage, back and forth to the feed store. Everything you can think of, keep track of it. Breeding schedule. You got to know what time of year, when they're due, all that kind of thing. What's the duration? Because some rabbits will trend a little bit faster, some will trend a little bit longer for how long it takes to have babies, but it's usually about 31 days. Okay. Litter sizes. Understand the makeup of your litter sizes. The sexing of them, the mortality of them, all that kind of thing. Be keeping track of that. Your growth rate. You gotta know how fast these things are growing, and that'll change at different times of year. So keep track of it as often as you can, and you'll learn a lot about it. Okay. When you process them and you're getting it into a product that you can consume, you gotta have an understanding of live weight and dressed weight. You have to have that understanding. You have to be able to demonstrate it consistently. Otherwise, you're just going to be guessing, okay? And then at some point, you have a rabbit that's a little bit too small, but it's already dead now, and you're sort of committed, and you can't really sell it, though, because it's too small. You don't want to get into that situation, okay? Harvest schedule. Know your output. You want to stick with an ethical breeding schedule. You don't want to try and ramp things up or down based off of some sort of demand. You want to do you, and then whatever that is, that's what you advertise as being, availability. And inventory. Make sure you know how much inventory you have. Make sure you know how old it is, and that way you know when to use it. Okay, so like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a video series, okay? So there's about 6 steps to go through to establish your own company, to have your own business and be doing this and actually making money. We're going to go through all that. This was step 1, okay? It's not much. You're just tracking what you're already doing, okay? And so if you're raising rabbits and things are going well and you're saying, hey, this is great, I'd like to keep doing this, but it's getting expensive, I'd like to kind of offset some of the costs, that's what we're on our path to do, okay? So just start with tracking everything, tracking all these things I talked about, and then we'll go into the next part of the video series, which will be basically doing some market research, figuring out what out there, what kind of demand is out there, what kind of supply is out there, and we'll kind of go through how to make you a business. Finally, y'all, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I'm always excited to interact with people. Yeah, I know no plan you can come out with or tips you can come out with it's going to make everybody happy. Somebody's going to disagree with me, and that's fine. Let's just keep it respectful, and we can talk about why we're on different pages on it. But I'm telling you through my experience, this has all been true for me, and I wouldn't steer you wrong. Okay. But if you have any questions or comments, please leave it below. We'll see you for the next video, which is going to go over some market research and how to really kind of understand your situational awareness for where you're going to try to be making a business. But until then, God bless.